Thank you. Thanks for having us. Well, the reason Shortleaf's so prevalent in Arkansas is because nobody wants to live there.
And we want to continue to encourage that.
It's kind of a joke, but it's true. We're the least populated southern state.
Trying to set it up.
Okay. And I'm done. No, I don't. So as Mike said, my name's McRee Anderson. I'm from Arkansas, and I've been with the Nature Conservancy for about 15 years. I grew up in fire management with the Nature Conservancy and being a burn boss like Mr. Strivers over there. Did a lot of control burning over the years, oversee the fire program in Arkansas as the fire manager for years, but then also moved into one of these weird kind of nebulous partnership roles to where most of my job is partnershiping and developing relationships to get landscape scale management across the system, whatever that means, and with whoever that means. Are you advancing that or am I doing?
I'm advancing it.
Okay.
I think you just actually did as well. Try it again.
Okay. So Mike asked me to talk a little bit about the Western Ranges perspective for many of you who haven't been over there, and I wanted to just kind of hit on some of the points of why we are where we are today. And if I have enough time, which I hope I do, I want to give some future directions and challenges. Just because 90% of this slide is going to be nuts and bolts and about what we're doing good, but there's also a lot that we're not doing right and many stump holes that we've stuck into that we can't get out of. And this presentation doesn't cover it all because there's some research that Mike wanted us to highlight right off the top of some of the stuff that we've done recently with publications. But I want to try to capture a lot of the things that we're not doing correctly or see as we need to change the ship, okay? Mike's already shown that slide. If you know Arkansas, this is Arkansas. This is both the Ozark and Ouachita National Forests. It's the interior Highlands, we call it. This landscape's the interior Highlands. And it's got 3.5 million acres, if not more, of shortleaf pine oak ecosystem. And it's very low population density. And the mountain ranges are different. The Ouachita Mountains, as Jim didn't say it actually, but it's east-west trending ridges, these long ridges with pine on the south and oak on the north. Henry Schoolcroft came down through the western part in 1821, came through Arkansas River Valley and went into Fort Smith and then bumped down south with his native guide, and he said, came across one of these ridges and it goes all the way, it goes 120 miles to Little Rock, Arkansas. It goes back all the way over to here. So he came through here and came down in here off of Fort Smith and got into here, and one of these ridges goes almost all the way to Little Rock. And he asked his guide, he came into this pine stand and he said, oh my gosh, because he was a botanist, and he said, where is this luxurious prairie ground under this pine stand, and how far does it go? And the Indian guide said all the way to the hot waters of the Ouachita, which is about right here. And that was our first glimpse in 1821 of the scale of the pine savanna woodland across the Ouachitas, at least the one that I've found. I know Jim has got hundreds more. But anyways, you know, incredible landscape full of pine oak woods. A lot of it public land, but a lot of private land, more private land surrounding it than public. But the Ozarks are a lot different because it's more intermixed. Just depending on the topography, pine oak components can be almost anywhere on the landscape, which necessarily it dictates how these forests manage their fires completely in places completely different and at different scales. Also, the other interesting thing is this landscape burned historically at a landscape scale. The Ouachitas gets over 50 inches of rain a year, I think, maybe 55, some years even 60. That's a lot of rain for a place that, you know, in one August, a dry supercell or a dry thunderstorm can come over. And, you know, 3 years ago, we had 60,000 lightning strikes all across from the entire system. And so it just, these fall fires are just, the whole place can burn. You know, historically, you can see it that the whole place would burn up in a month. And we know this from the fire history studies that's been done, and I'm not going to go into all this, but this is some of the anecdotal information back 10 years ago that brought the collaborative together, that bound the team to say, okay, this is our call. This is our, as Bob was asking, what is our desired condition, or what do we want our forest to look like, and how do we want to manage it? These are the components that got us to where we are. And as a result, we know that our system, this is the graph of that fire cookie that showed the fire scarring, and so we had pretty frequent fires until the invention of Smokey the Bear. Like everybody says, Smokey the Bear isn't bad, but this is a relic of how frequent our fire history was across the landscape. We actually have trees from 1680 coming off of both forests with fire scars on them that dated it all the way up to 1920. So do we want to manage the whole system with this remnant? Maybe not, but this is a snapshot of where we came from. And then more research showed from Tom Foti, this is just a glimpse of what the Ozarks had, based on the GLO records, had over 1.5 million acres of pine oak woodland across the system. Now we have, back then we had 500 acres. And so something created open conditions across both forests at scale. And we believe it was fire. And of course, after living through a couple of ice storms and tornadoes and hurricanes, because hurricanes sweep up there and we get a lot of high wind in the high country, a lot of disturbance in those highlands. This is just a picture. There's lots of pictures of what the system used to look like. There's char on the pine there, and I think that's the first ranger of the Jessieville Ranger District in the Ouachita National Forest. Virgin pine, shortleaf. But now we have mostly this. Like all of us do. And so years ago, we started with how are we going to manage our way out of this? It's wildlife. There's wildlife issues here, ecological integrity issues, stand replacement fire issues. We still have hundreds of thousands of acres that look like this. Overstocked stands with little to no management. But we also have learned how to try to manage some of our stands and to keep the stuff that we are managing in good shape. Part of this calling started from not pine, but oak. Pine was just this thing that, in the plantations was industrial forestry pine problems, the pine beetle. And so the partners on the public lands and our WMA folks really, weren't looking at pine as something that we were going to lose. But oak started us down this trajectory to think of pine oak as a whole landscape, because we lost 500,000 acres of pine oak forest to a native boar, and the public went crazy, and our state game and our federal agencies were like, is this the future of our landscape, is a dead forest? So at that time we had a little team together called the Oak Team. But this landscape's challenging because, this slide doesn't do it justice, but this is pine regen here, and then pine overstory intermixed with oak and grass here. So the primary carrier of fire is grass, but just like the piney barrens here, these fires are going to get big for landowners and for public land experts who know how to manage fire. So putting fire back into these places in many of these landscapes it can be difficult. And as you see here, this is an area where we were doing a controlled burn. We have a burn crew, and we burn 8 months out of the year. And we were burning our place frequently. They were burning theirs every 10 to 15 years. And these are the results they were getting. Because they weren't burning it frequently enough, they were getting, fire runs in stand replacement fires on their controlled burns. Private landowners can't do that kind of burning. It's just not safe, and threats to public safety is too much. It's also an issue on our state parks. This is a state park. Was an old growth pine forest. Our first state park in Arkansas, Petit Jean Mountain, and in 2003 had a stand replacement fire through that old growth pine forest. All shortleaf, stand replaced it, and that's what it is today. Now it's actually up to here, and it's just a pine dog-haired thicket. They still hadn't started managing it, even though we've been up there 10 times talking to the superintendent, talking to the bosses. We're still talking about masticating it.
You just like that nice
It is a good one. And if they were in the room, they would like this talk anyways, because they've heard me gripe a lot. Private lands, these guys are doing their best to get by, just like Mike was saying. What we're losing here is regeneration, When it becomes wooey, it becomes a park-like setting, and the pine regeneration just doesn't happen in there. And these old trees just slowly die out. So I talk about the regeneration issue here, especially in the pine oak system. The pine's not going to regenerate under here, and oak sprouts are, and maples and ash and hop hornbeam and all the other shade-loving mesophytic species are going to come in. So there's just no pine regeneration in an unmanaged forest. And it's all over our ecosystem. And, up in 2000, the point of this slide, it's busy, but the point of this slide in 2000, we were burning around this is government, this is national forest lands, was burning about 34,000 acres. And back then we were thinking, we should be burning about 650,000 acres on both forests, which is like pie in the sky, ecological kind of nature nut conservation. What is our desired fire condition kind of thing? Not including humans in that system, just thinking if we were pyromaniacs, what does the system need to maintain itself or to help us get back somewhere? We were thinking about 500,000 acres or more. And everybody laughed. But in 2015, we had a record year. Both the forests had a record year. They got extra helicopter. Good burning season. It was a dry December, January, February, so they did a lot of burning in December, January, and February. And, I've rounded some of these numbers up because they'll go out to the 1/10 of an acre to count it. But, it was a record. They had a record year, 2015. Then we had a couple of other major incidents throughout the southeast and some bad weather. And you can see we lost 100,000 acres in 1 year. What does that do when you're managing a system and not even catching up with what you got to manage? You start getting behind in your burn targets. So even though these numbers sound like a lot, when you're talking about what you're actually doing in timber treatments and WSI work, and you've got a lot on your plate to manage, missing a couple hundred acres or a couple thousand, tens of thousands of acres of burning can have ramifications quickly in a place that gets a lot of rain a year. Part of solving these complex kind of social ecological problems was the Interior Highlands Collaborative. It's kind of kicked off in the last few years. Got some partners. I'm here just to speak about it. I'm also part of the team, but I'm here standing on the backs of giants. There's so many other people in Arkansas that are working on this behind the scenes. I'm kind of just the messenger. I didn't put all this together. I'm not the expert, but I'm here on the back of giants, and there's 20 people who are a part of this. But this collaborative, this is a new logo. We got hats and T-shirts coming in November. We're trying to really ramp up and put things together, and this is just a snapshot after one day. There you are, Sean. But anyways, the point of this is we've come together on a collaborative as with a vision and putting things together on paper to try to focus our efforts on what are we doing here. And I won't get into the nuts and bolts, but I will say there's 5 things: management, science, public engagement, policy, and funding. These things we're working on, behind the scenes a little bit here on this topic, in the weeds on this topic, and I'll talk a little bit about each of those. We're going to be meeting in November to kind of get on this action items, like what's our 1 to 24 month deliverables within this matrix. But these are the things that keeps us together and working. If we don't have the collaborative, then all of the problems that we have out on the landscape are just going to magnify, and we're going to have inertia. This is how our collaborative views the collaborative. And we have multiple projects going, millions of dollars coming in, tens of millions of dollars coming into Arkansas for all of this type of work. From 2 CFLR programs to, and this is actually bigger, to a Happy Bat project. We call it Happy Bat because it needs fire. It's the endangered Indiana bat. We're wrapping up our Joint Chiefs program, which is the NRCS, U.S. Forest Service thing that's happening. So we got a lot of money coming into these landscapes, and we want to make sure that that they're successful, the best they can be, okay? And just an example, so this is the Ozark National Forest. Strivers, you grew up right in here, up in Newton County, but you know, this is a third of the national forest. You know, we're talking about 300, well, not a third, but 350,000 acres. And they're going to treat 217,000 acres of this landscape, and we're 3/4 of the way through this program. You know, this is 50,000 acres of burning, if not more, you know, treating woodlands across 15,000 acres annually of woodland restoration. For the Ouachitas is a little bit different. They just went big. They just wanted to increase, they wanted to double their acres of prescribed fire. Because the Ouachitas has the red cockaded woodpecker, they wanted to expand the footprint, they want to grow the colony, they want to have more bird habitat. Well, the way to do that is to have more burning. And so the timber management has been following the fires, and the fires are following the timber management. They're trying to get all that intertwined, and they're trying really hard to increase the scale and scope of their fire. But the Joint Chiefs combines all of that idea that the Forest Service is working on, because, you know, the Forest Service is the one that's putting up the large smoke columns, right? I mean, you guys, if you've been around and doing controlled burning, if you're doing small burns, you might impact your neighbor and they might see you burning 3 or 4 miles away. But the forests are up high, right? So when the Forest Service is burning, you can almost see it anywhere in the state, unless you're way off here east of Little Rock in the Gulf Coastal Plain. I mean, when you drive, 70 miles through this corridor on the interstate, you know the Ouachitas had a 10,000 acre burn day because the sky is brown and hazy, and you can still see columns going up on the Ouachitas because they're burning. So, and you know the whole state knows that there's fire there's fire in the system. And so the Joint Chiefs was designed to kind of get all those public landowners out there in the rural landscape who lives around these places, get them trying to figure out some of the same management practices as well. And it's been hugely successful, but also some huge challenges as well. Over the last few years, they did 20,000 acres of burning in the system. I think it was a three-year deal. And did almost 10,000 acres of some kind of management in the mid-story and understory. And that's on private land. So it's made our state forestry a little bit uncomfortable, just because now there's thousands of people. A lot of folks out there doing burning. They got a little burn plan, they might have their fire lines, but you know, there's a lot of people out there with a drip torch now, rural landowners doing controlled burning. What's that mean? It means there's more potential for wildfires from people that have learned to do controlled burning. Timber management is a huge component of this. I'm not going to get into it, but if we're not managing the timber to open up the system, then and using the fire to get back in there, then we can't really. Our federal partners can't pay for the restoration. Okay. Same thing, somewhat similar on public land or on private land. These places need a forest management plan and this kind of thing. But this, I'm not going to go through it, but the prescription is just thin and burn it, thin and burn it and put fire back in it and see what happens and monitor the results. And that's where the collaboratives really come into play. We've got a monitoring program, and I'll show you a couple slides of that. But if we don't monitor, I mean, that sounds crazy, because I know probably none of us monitor. Okay, we only monitor because we have to, because my boss is a pretty anal. But it's important. So we monitor in a way that we don't monitor to death. We monitor for results. Okay, which I think's been really beneficial for us as a collaborative. Okay, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have 120 permanent macroplots across the Ozarks alone. And it means we got another 120 on the Ouachitas, or 100 or something on the Ouachitas. So we'll have like 200 and something monitoring macroplots. And so every summer, for about 5 days, we work with the Forest Service and we go to these plots and we try to get a third of them every year. So in 3 years, we have done 1 rotation. Okay. And this is some of our restored stand stuff. But this, what we're doing, it's not complex. It's counting plants. It's doing the ground layer survey, doing the trees and the shrubs to species. And that's it. And so one plot will take us 20 minutes, 30 minutes on iPad. I don't have to analyze the data. That's what Gabe does. But I'm going to show you a couple of results of his data, just some high points. But you can monitor. There are other monitoring protocols out place the Forest Service does, and we do have some breeding bird survey stuff and some water quality stuff, but we just handle the plant community monitoring. This is plant community monitoring designed to track our vegetation trajectory with our fire and management treatments. Helps adjust timber target, mid-story, and helps quantify the treatment results. This is the big challenge with us, is like, how do we get back into the feedback loop? How do we change management? Well, if we don't monitor, we don't change management. Because the partners can scream and gripe all day long to the piney lands about, you need to do this, you need to do this, but if you don't have monitoring, in our woods, we can't talk scientifically if we don't have our monitoring results. So in a nutshell, this is off the Ouachitas after 5 years of monitoring, and it shows that we're having significant basal overstory reduction. Jim, I don't know if you've seen this, but this is baseline, and this is 2014. And these are the slopes. But the point is we're reducing the overstory with our timber management and fire treatments. We're creating more open habitat, early cereal habitat. We're also significantly increasing the ground layer, species per plot. And this is pretty cool, which is kind of, everybody knows it. It's so basic, but we have to put it in science. The reduction of overstory increases your herbaceous. Overall basal area was the best predictor of herbaceous species richness. So the more reduced overstory, this is basal area, 35, you had higher species diversity.
Does that take into account differences in overstory species, like overstory versus different amount of sunlight that comes through?
Well, once you're at 35 BA, you're pretty wide open. Yeah. But no, I would say it's in there. But this kind of data helps guide us. I don't know if I have the other one in there. Am I done? Okay. The last thing I would say is in this, as I didn't put it in there, is that our most diverse plots are riparian. And they burn the least. So this begs the question, is our fire regimes appropriate? We get into this. Are we burning at the right time of year? Do you want to do growing season burns in fall and spring, and when the fire punks around for a week? No. Forest Service and partners, as a burn boss, I don't like to do that either. Got to wrap it up, get done, go to the next day. But ecologically, these types of fires, low surface fires, 6-inch flame lengths, have scorch heights of 8 to 10 feet. Very good. Fall burning with helicopters, might not kill the overstory, but line officers and forest managers, and as well as private landowners, they don't want to see that kind of effects on the fire. That looks like a wildfire, okay? But I got pictures of this place after it greened up, and it looks beautiful. But this fall burning, spring and fall burning, these kind of effects that we're missing missing months of burning cycles, but we got to deal with these kind of effects socially. The tools thing is a major issue. As you start thinning the woods, if you thin the top off too fast, we're realizing that we're creating a giant flush of shrub development. And so how to manage that? If you miss your fire cycle, you've got to use other mechanical treatments to get back in there. which, pardon?
Growing season burns.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. So we're getting these things now. We're going to have every tool in the toolbox. But the point is demonstration sites are key and important for us. If we can maintain and keep those things going, as you mentioned, that really helps us in the long run. And we know this because it's groceries on the ground from the wildlife folks. It's water quality, it's soil stability, it's resilient forests. It's whatever we want to call it is what it is. I mean, these are resilient forests for climate change. All of the benefits are here. It's just a blessing that we still have this native species stuff still in the ground after 150 years. It's nice to have the state botanist out finding new record plants in every county. And it's nice to take tours. We do demonstration tours all the time to these places. We have a group to Tennessee coming out. But if we don't do the tours with all of our partners and landowners and whatnot, we probably do 20 of these, like Jim was saying, a year. Then the public's not going to come with us on this. And we have these kiosk displays. We're putting these things out all over the fireproof. We're putting them out all over the forest in our high profile areas where people are closest to the public. We're trying to burn closer and closer to the public as much as we can. And getting the media there. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not telling you what we're doing. But then it's nice to have Mike come out. So I'm done.
Who are your partners in that plan?
Our partners with the collaborative are at every agency in the state that manages land. And then, so U.S. Fish and Wildlife's bigger national folks, Quail Unlimited or Quail Forever, NWTF, Arkansas Forestry Commission, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, the Nature Conservancy, all the cooperative extension agency folks, NRCS.
They have an intensive semi-annual meeting that is very intensive. And they've been at this now about 20 plus years informally.
Yeah. But we have our challenges, so our future's going to be more challenging than the past, I think, because we've learned kind of how to do stuff. The next thing's more social, right? The northwest part of Arkansas is growing exponentially, just like in many of your home places. We're losing a culture of fire. There's a lot that we got. Smoke management guidelines. We got a lot of stuff to figure out. So, thanks for having me.